They stand perfectly still, frozen in the delicate silence of 1901. A father proud, a mother composed, and children arranged like fragile ornaments of innocence. At first glance, it seems like any other family portrait of its time, a simple record of love, legacy, and belonging. Yet if you look closely, if you allow your eyes to drift beyond the surface smiles and formal postures, something begins to stir. A whisper from beneath the image, a presence that feels almost alive. This photograph, so ordinary in its stillness, hides within it a secret that time itself could not bury. It is not merely a picture of a family, but a reflection of the human soul caught between memory and fate, between what we show and what we hide. And once you learn what happened after the camera flashed, you can never look at it the same way again. Every photograph that appears ordinary at first glance conceals within it a deep reservoir of unconscious meaning, and the 1901 family photo is no exception. To the untrained eye, it shows a family frozen in a moment of harmony. The father upright and proud, the mother serene yet restrained, the children positioned with deliberate symmetry, and the faint shadow of the photographer suggesting the presence of an unseen observer. But beyond this surface of social order lies a psychological landscape far richer and darker than the image reveals. What seems like a simple act of portraiture becomes a symbolic ritual of concealment. The photo captures not what the people were, but what they wished to appear as, transforming the act of posing into an act of repression. Every smile becomes a mask, every straightened posture a defense against the deeper truths of the self. In this way, the photograph is a monument to the persona, the carefully constructed facade that individuals build to survive within the expectations of family and society. In the late Victorian and early Edwardian eras, family portraits were not mere representations, but social performances. Each gesture, each placement was coded with meaning. A father's firm hand on his son's shoulder signified authority and lineage. A mother's clasped hands represented moral purity. A child's upward gaze reflected innocence and hope. Yet the more structured the composition, the more it revealed what was being suppressed: the fear of moral failure, the anxiety of maintaining appearances, and the silent griefs that could not be spoken aloud. This 1901 image, when looked at deeply, begins to fracture under its own stillness. The faint tension in the mother's eyes, the slight disconnection in the daughter's expression, the unacknowledged distance between figures, all these elements betray a subtle unease. They hint at the emotional currents swirling beneath the surface calm, at a family bound together by duty more than affection, by propriety more than intimacy. The notion of the ordinary here becomes deceptive. The more ordinary something appears, the more likely it is concealing something extraordinary, something repressed, forgotten, or unresolved. This photograph embodies that paradox. It functions as a psychological threshold, where the visible world of manners and civility meets the invisible world of longing and fear. It invites the viewer to sense what the subjects themselves could not name. The still image becomes alive with unspoken stories, with dreams that never found expression, with desires that were denied because they did not fit the rigid moral codes of their age. Even the physical setting of the photo, the ornate chair, the heavy drapes, the dim lighting, contributes to this atmosphere of containment. It feels as though the very room conspires to keep the truth hidden, trapping each figure within the narrow boundaries of decorum. What makes this image haunting is not any supernatural quality, but its profound psychological realism. It reveals that the true mystery of a photograph lies not in what the camera captures, but in what it cannot. The photograph records the visible, but the psyche leaves its fingerprints in the invisible spaces, in the distance between two figures, in the stiffness of a hand, in the direction of a gaze that looks slightly away from the lens. The ordinary becomes the veil through which the unconscious speaks. What looks simple and serene becomes charged with the weight of silence, the presence of what cannot be spoken. This is why the image endures and disturbs, why its ordinariness feels like an illusion. Beneath the surface of this 1901 family portrait lies an entire world of psychological truth, a world where every gesture, every expression, and every shadow holds the secret of what it means to be human, trapped between appearance and authenticity. The second key note revolves around the idea that every image hides a shadow, not merely the physical darkness cast by light, but the unseen weight of human emotion, memory, and fate. In the 1901 family photograph, the true haunting presence is not visible in any face or gesture. It resides in what the photograph conceals. The people appear composed, dressed neatly, their eyes fixed toward the camera as though meeting the gaze of eternity. But beneath the calm exterior, there exists an unspoken tension, a silent tremor that the camera has unconsciously preserved. The photograph, like a mirror of the psyche, captures not only the conscious presentation of self, but also the repressed energies that linger just beyond awareness. The smiles and poised expressions are masks behind which the collective pain of the family hides, and the moment the shutter clicked, those masks were sealed forever within the frame. It is as though the photograph became an unconscious confession, silently recording what words could not express. This shadow is not the mark of evil or guilt in the moral sense, but the inevitable duality of human nature, the truth that every person, every family carries within them the light of what they wish to show and the darkness of what they wish to forget. In this family's story, what followed after the photo was taken adds a chilling depth to this understanding. Within a year, one of the children in the photograph died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. The tragedy shattered the illusion of harmony that the image tried to project, and those who later looked back at the photo claimed to sense the omen within it. They said the child's eyes looked distant, as if already belonging to another world, and that a faint shadow crossed his face, darker than the lighting could explain. These observations may be mere projections, but they reveal a psychological truth, that human intuition recognizes the presence of the shadow even when logic cannot. The photograph thus becomes a symbol of premonition, a still moment haunted by the inevitability of what was to come. To understand the depth of this haunting, one must see the photograph as more than a document. It is an intersection where the visible meets the invisible. Every family, no matter how noble or pure, carries a lineage of sorrow, unhealed traumas, secrets buried in silence, emotions suppressed for the sake of appearances. The shadow in this image is therefore not confined to one individual, but represents a collective inheritance. The tragedy that followed may have been triggered by external events, but its psychological roots were already woven into the unseen fabric of the family's shared psyche. The photograph merely revealed it through symbolism rather than through action. Each gaze in the image points in a slightly different direction, as though the unity it tries to portray is already fracturing. The father's eyes seem stern yet weary, the mother's composed but distant, the children's expressions mismatched, all signs that something beneath the surface was beginning to unravel. In the stillness of the image, the shadow breathes. It speaks in the silence between the figures, in the way the light touches one face more than another, in the subtle imbalance that the conscious mind might overlook. The photograph becomes a kind of prophecy, but not because it predicts the future. Rather, because it reveals the truth of the present that no one at the time could acknowledge. It holds the tension between the seen and unseen, between control and chaos. When tragedy finally arrived, it was not an interruption, but a manifestation of what had long been hidden. That is the essence of the shadow. It does not come from outside, but rises from within, seeking expression through symbols, accidents, and fate. The 1901 family photo stands as a visual testament to this eternal principle, that every image, every life, and every family contains within it the seeds of its own mystery, its own sorrow, its own shadow waiting to be recognized. In every photograph, the objects that surround the subjects hold their own language, a silent archive of emotions, energies, and memories that human eyes rarely perceive. In the 1901 family photo, it is not only the faces and postures that matter, but the environment itself, the chair upon which the father sits, the lace that drapes across the table, the dark curtain hanging like a boundary between the visible and the unseen. Each of these objects carries a residue of the family's inner life, a kind of psychic fingerprint left behind through repeated touch, proximity, and meaning. The camera, though mechanical, acts as a sensitive instrument that records not just the outer form of these things, but also the unconscious aura that surrounds them. What makes this image unsettling is that the objects seem almost too alive, as though they are aware of the human drama unfolding around them. After the family's tragedy, the sudden death of the youngest child, and the emotional unraveling that followed, those who revisited the photograph reported feeling a peculiar heaviness in its presence. It was as if the objects within the image had absorbed the pain, holding it like ghosts bound in stillness. The unconscious memory of objects is a powerful and often overlooked dimension of human experience. Every possession, every piece of furniture, every article of clothing becomes imbued with the emotions of those who use it. The father's cane leaning in the corner may hold the quiet authority of his role. The mother's brooch pinned to her collar may contain her longing to maintain dignity amid emotional restraint. The child's toy half hidden under the chair may whisper of innocence already fading into memory. These are not lifeless things, but vessels of symbolic energy, bearing witness to the human soul. When the photograph captured them, it did more than preserve their image, it sealed their emotional resonance. The result is a portrait that feels charged, as if each object within it carries a secret story, each shape and texture echoing something unresolved within the family itself. The curtain in the background, for instance, can be seen as more than a decorative detail. It becomes a psychological symbol. Its darkness separates the family from the unknown beyond the frame, just as the conscious mind seeks to separate itself from the unconscious depths it fears to confront. Yet the faint folds and shadows within the fabric suggest movement, a subtle life beneath the stillness, hinting that the barrier between the known and unknown is never truly solid. The ornate chair, so precisely carved, mirrors the father's desire for control and permanence, but like all symbols of stability, it too becomes fragile under the weight of unseen forces. Even the lighting, which illuminates the family unevenly, seems to tell a story of imbalance, light touching some faces more than others, as if to reveal where the soul is open and where it hides. After the tragedy, when the photograph was looked upon again, people claimed they could see signs that had gone unnoticed. The way the child's hand barely rested on his mother's arm, the faint tension in her posture, the sharp gleam of the silver frame on the wall. These were not coincidences, but unconscious expressions of a reality already unfolding beneath awareness. The objects, in their stillness, reflected the unspoken tensions of the family dynamic. They carried within them what the people could not voice: the weight of expectation, the fatigue of social roles, the anxiety of maintaining appearances. The tragedy merely brought to light what the objects had already known. In this way, the 1901 photograph transcends the limits of visual memory and becomes a vessel of psychological resonance. The objects, once mundane, become sacred symbols, not because of their beauty, but because they reveal how human emotion imprints itself upon the material world. The photograph turns into a psychic landscape where every object vibrates with unseen significance, every shadow conceals an emotional truth, and every preserved detail reminds us that the inanimate world is never truly silent. It listens, absorbs, and remembers. What was once thought of as a simple room becomes a stage upon which the human unconscious performs its most intimate dramas, and the camera, without intention, becomes the archivist of the soul. The fourth key note centers on the eerie notion that fate can whisper through symbols long before it manifests in life, and the 1901 family photograph stands as a haunting example of this phenomenon. When the family posed for the image, they believed it to be a moment of unity, a simple act of memory-making, yet the arrangement within the frame seemed to foreshadow a sorrow none of them could yet perceive. The youngest child, positioned at the center, appears serene, yet strangely detached, his gaze not directed at the camera, but toward some unseen horizon. In the months following the photograph, that same child would mysteriously vanish, his disappearance never fully explained. In retrospect, the image came to be seen not merely as a family portrait, but as a premonition, a silent prophecy encoded in gestures, light, and space. It is as though the photograph had become a vessel for destiny, a mirror through which the unconscious revealed what the conscious mind could not yet accept. Fate, in this sense, is not an external force descending upon us, but an internal truth emerging from the depths of the psyche, speaking through symbols rather than words. When the photograph is examined closely, its composition carries an uncanny symmetry that feels both deliberate and accidental. The father stands to one side, his hand resting on the back of a chair, suggesting authority but also distance. The mother sits opposite him, her posture composed but rigid, as though holding herself together beneath an invisible strain. Between them, the children form a fragile bridge, their bodies the connection between two worlds, their innocence the emotional glue that binds the family's fractured unity. Yet in this very arrangement lies a hidden imbalance. The child at the center, whose fate would later define the family's sorrow, is slightly out of line, his form illuminated by a faint ray of light that falls unevenly across the image. Such details, imperceptible to casual observation, seem to carry the weight of meaning. It is not the photograph that predicts tragedy, but the human soul that unconsciously arranges itself in a way that reflects what it already knows, but dares not name. Fate, in this interpretation, is not linear but circular. It begins within the psyche, ripples outward into behavior, and returns as consequence. The family, though unaware, had already begun to enact the pattern that would lead to their undoing. The photograph captured that moment of tension, freezing it in time like a visual equation of destiny. The father's gaze, firm yet unfocused, betrays a mind burdened by unspoken worries. The mother's expression, gentle but strained, hints at emotional fatigue. The child's distant eyes mirror the quiet resignation of a soul already halfway into the realm of mystery. These are not conscious signals but symbolic manifestations of the inner life, the language of fate written in the alphabet of posture and light. After the disappearance, those who survived would revisit the photograph and feel its unease as if for the first time. Some claimed that the child's face seemed to fade more quickly than the others, as though the image itself acknowledged his absence. Others swore that when light struck the photo at a certain angle, his outline appeared faintly blurred, like a ghost caught between worlds. Such stories may stem from grief and longing, yet they reveal something profound about the human experience of fate. We are pattern-seeking beings, drawn to symbols, compelled to find meaning even in tragedy. The photograph thus becomes a bridge between the rational and the irrational, between memory and myth. The uncanny feeling that the image predicted the family's sorrow speaks to a deeper truth about human existence, that our unconscious often perceives what our conscious mind refuses to see. The tragedy was not merely an event that happened to the family. It was an unfolding of an internal drama already present within them, mirrored unconsciously in their arrangement, expressions, and the subtle choreography of the photograph. Fate, therefore, is not a punishment or coincidence, but a revelation, the psyche speaking through the language of form, guiding us toward what must be faced. The 1901 family photograph, ordinary in appearance, yet charged with mystery, becomes a timeless emblem of this truth, that the future often casts its shadow backward into the present, and that sometimes the soul, through symbols, knows before we do what will come to pass. A family is never merely a collection of individuals. It is a single organism composed of many souls, a living network of inherited emotions, memories, and unseen influences. The 1901 family photograph, though still and composed, becomes an embodiment of this truth. Each person within the frame appears distinct. The father with his posture of authority, the mother with her restrained grace, the children with their innocence and curiosity. Yet beneath this individuality flows a shared current, an invisible web of psychic connection. This web is what binds generations together, shaping destinies and repeating patterns long after individual lives have ended. The photograph, when observed deeply, becomes a portrait not of separate people, but of one collective psyche expressing itself through multiple faces. The tragedy that followed, the mysterious disappearance of the youngest child and the slow disintegration of the family, revealed how intimately their fates were intertwined. It was not a single event affecting one person, but a rupture that echoed through the entire system of their shared consciousness. Every family carries within it a reservoir of ancestral energy, joys, traumas, and unresolved conflicts passed down like invisible heirlooms. These inheritances shape behavior and emotion in ways that the individuals themselves may never understand. In the photograph, the father's stern expression and upright stance suggest a man bound by duty, perhaps carrying the weight of expectations inherited from generations before him. The mother's gentleness and quiet reserve may conceal a lineage of emotional restraint, an unspoken rule that love must always appear dignified, never desperate. The children, placed carefully between them, embody both the hope of renewal and the repetition of the old patterns. When tragedy strikes a family such as this, it rarely emerges from nowhere. It rises from the unacknowledged depths of their shared unconscious, surfacing in one member as a symbol of what the entire group cannot confront. In this case, the child's disappearance became the external manifestation of a deeper psychological fracture that had long existed within the family structure. The photograph, though taken in a single moment, captures centuries of unseen inheritance. The expressions, the positioning, even the emotional temperature of the scene, all reflect the invisible history shaping them. The collective unconscious of the family pulses beneath the surface, organizing their relationships, defining who leads and who yields, who carries the burden of guilt, and who becomes the vessel of unspoken sorrow. After the tragedy, those who survived would look at the photograph differently. What once seemed a celebration of unity now appeared as a map of hidden tensions. The father's hand not resting on his wife's shoulder but near it, the daughter's slight lean toward her mother, the distance between siblings that suggested more than physical space. Each detail became an unconscious confession of emotional distance, of unacknowledged pain quietly embedded in their interactions. The notion of the collective soul of the family extends beyond biology. It is a field of emotional resonance in which every action and thought participates. When one member suffers, the others feel the echo, even if they cannot name it. The 1901 family, after their loss, experienced this collective grief not as individuals, but as a single body wounded in many places at once. The father retreated further into silence. The mother began to dream of the child calling from a distance. The remaining siblings felt an unspoken guilt for surviving. The photograph, once a symbol of pride, became a haunting relic that tied them all to that shared wound. This interconnection reveals how no life exists in isolation. Each member of a family holds a fragment of the whole, and through these fragments, generations communicate unconsciously. The tragedy within this family was not an isolated event, but a continuation of emotional patterns that had been repeating silently through time. The photograph stands as a witness to that truth, showing how deeply woven human lives are, how every smile, every distance, every unspoken thought contributes to the larger tapestry of shared destiny. Beneath the formal attire and polite posture of the 1901 family lies the profound mystery of the human bond, the unseen forces that unite people not just through love and blow. The final keynote rests on the idea that a photograph can serve as a mirror, not of physical reality, but of the soul itself. When one gazes upon the 1901 family photo, the initial impression is of formality and composure. The family sits neatly arranged, their clothing carefully chosen, their expressions fixed in the solemn dignity typical of the era. But as the eyes linger, a strange unease begins to rise, as if the photograph is staring back. It does not merely show a family, it reveals the psychological truth beneath their appearance. Each figure becomes a reflection of the inner human condition, the tension between light and darkness, joy and sorrow, being and loss. The power of this photograph lies in its ability to awaken something in the observer, to stir recognition of one's own hidden depths. It acts as a psychological mirror in which the viewer glimpses the complexity of the human psyche, the fragile balance between the face we show the world and the truths we keep buried beneath it. The moment a photograph becomes a mirror of the soul, it ceases to be only a relic of the past. It transforms into an encounter between two consciousnesses, the one captured in the image and the one beholding it. The family in the 1901 photograph, though long gone, continues to speak through their frozen gestures. Their silence becomes eloquent, their stillness alive with the energy of everything that cannot die: emotion, memory, desire. When a viewer stands before this image, they are drawn into an unspoken dialogue with the unknown aspects of themselves. The faint sorrow in the mother's eyes, the restrained authority in the father's posture, the distant innocence of the children. All these expressions become symbols of inner realities that the viewer recognizes without words. It is as if the photograph exposes not only the family's hidden story, but also the viewer's own. In that moment of recognition, the image ceases to belong to history and becomes timeless, functioning as a bridge between souls across generations. This photograph holds a peculiar power because it embodies the paradox of life and death coexisting in a single moment. The people in it appear alive, yet are eternally still, their vitality preserved and their mortality silently acknowledged. The child who would later vanish looks out with an expression that hovers between presence and absence, between this world and another. To look at him is to feel the fragility of existence itself, the way every joy carries the shadow of its loss, and every life inevitably turns into memory. The photograph confronts the viewer with this truth, not through words, but through silence. Its quietness becomes its language, and in that stillness one senses the profound mystery of human existence. The image becomes a contemplative mirror where beauty and sorrow, order and decay, innocence and knowledge are fused into one inseparable whole. The act of observing the photograph is itself a psychological experience. As the viewer gazes, they project their own unconscious emotions onto it. The sadness they perceive in the mother's eyes may in fact be their own. The sense of foreboding that lingers in the arrangement of figures may be the reflection of their own anxieties about loss, time, or fate. The photograph, therefore, becomes a kind of initiation into self-awareness. It invites the observer to confront the parts of themselves they have long ignored, their own fears of disappearance, their longing for connection. In this way, the 1901 family photo transcends its historical moment to become an eternal mirror of the psyche. It reminds us that every image, every human encounter, every memory we hold is both personal and universal, both real and symbolic. The photograph endures not because of the tragedy that followed, but because it awakens a sense of recognition, a deep, wordless understanding that within every human being lies the same duality. The yearning for permanence in a world that changes, the desire to be remembered even as time erases our presence. To look upon this image is to feel the mirror of the soul reflecting back our own hidden truths. It is to realize that we, too, are like the family within it, poised between life and disappearance, light and shadow, meaning and mystery. The photograph, once thought to capture others, ultimately reveals us to ourselves, but through the echoes of everything their ancestors once felt and never resolved.